The rain poured down in heavy sheets that night as I sat on the edge of my bed, staring at the small white stick in my trembling hands. Two faint lines appeared, like they were carved into my fate, mocking me with their undeniable truth. My heart pounded in my chest as I realized what it meant. I was pregnant. For a few moments, I could not breathe. I thought about Daniel, my boyfriend of 3 years, the man I believed would love me no matter what. We had talked about our future, many times about marriage and children. But those were dreams for another day, not now. We were still young, still figuring out life, and money was always tight. Still deep in my heart, I thought he would stay by my side. I wiped my tears and decided to call him. My voice cracked as I told him I needed to see him urgently. He agreed to meet at the small cafe near my apartment, the one where we had our first date. I thought the familiar place might make the news easier to bear for both of us. When he walked in, his smile was faint and distracted. He looked tired, maybe from work, maybe from life. I tried to gather my courage and finally told him, I am pregnant. For a moment, his eyes widened in shock. Then a shadow fell over his face. His jaw tightened, his hands clenched, and he looked away, as if the words I spoke were poison in the air. He did not reach for my hand. He did not smile or cry. He simply asked, Are you sure? I nodded, my tears spilling freely now. I told him I had taken multiple tests, and they all said the same thing. I thought he would say we would figure it out together. I thought he would hold me. Instead, he stood up without finishing his coffee and said he could not do this. My chest felt like it was being ripped apart. I called after him, but he did not look back. The sound of the door closing behind him was louder than the rain. It was the sound of my heart shattering. That night, I lay in bed, unable to sleep. My mind replayed every moment of our relationship, from the sweet texts he used to send to the way he would hold my face when we kissed. I could not understand how someone who once swore he would never leave me could walk away so easily. The silence in my apartment was suffocating. I placed my hand on my stomach and whispered to the tiny life inside me that I would not abandon them no matter what. But deep inside, fear consumed me. I was alone, and the man I thought would be my forever had turned into a stranger in a matter of seconds. The morning after Daniel left, I woke up with a pounding headache and swollen eyes from crying all night. The air in my apartment felt heavy, almost suffocating, as if it knew the weight I carried now. I dragged myself to the kitchen to make a cup of tea, but my hands were shaking so much that the hot water spilled across the counter. I checked my phone, hoping for a message from him, something to say he had changed his mind. But there was nothing, only silence. That silence became my new reality. I forced myself to go to work, pretending everything was fine. My co-workers greeted me with casual smiles, unaware that my world had collapsed. Days passed and the morning sickness began. I would run to the bathroom, clutching my stomach as the nausea twisted inside me. I learned to hide it from others, even though my body was betraying me with every passing week. My clothes began to feel tighter and I avoided mirrors because I could not face the truth without feeling abandoned all over again. I tried calling Daniel once more, telling myself that maybe he had just been shocked and needed time. The call rang and rang before going to voicemail. I left a message telling him I was scared and that I needed him. He never called back. One evening I saw him from a distance. He was walking down the street, laughing with friends, his arm around another girl. My legs felt weak, and I had to lean against a wall to keep from collapsing. He had moved on so quickly, while I was here struggling to keep my head above water. That image burned into my mind and replayed every night when I closed my eyes. Bills began to pile up on my table. Rent, utilities, doctor, visits for prenatal checkups. My savings were disappearing faster than I could replace them. I took extra shifts at work, even when my body screamed for rest. Every step I took felt heavier than the last, but I kept telling myself I had no choice. I had to survive. The nights were the hardest. Alone in my bed, I would press my hand against my stomach, feeling the faintest flutter of life and promise. My baby, that we would make it through somehow. I did not know how yet, but I knew I could not let the darkness swallow me whole. Every time I thought about Daniel, a fire started to burn deep inside me. It was not just heartbreak anymore. It was the beginning of something sharper, something that would grow with time. The whispers started small at first. At work, I caught 2 co-workers glancing at my stomach, then exchanging looks. Their voices dropped to hushed tones as I passed by. I told myself it was my imagination, but the truth revealed itself soon enough. One afternoon, I overheard them in the break room, talking about how foolish I must have been to get pregnant before marriage. Their words cut deep sharper than any knife. The neighborhood was no kinder. Mrs. Hart from the apartment across the hall stopped me one morning while I was checking my mailbox. Her eyes traveled slowly from my tired face to my growing belly, and she gave me that pitying smile I had come to hate. She said she hoped the father would come to his senses, but I could see in her eyes that she already believed he never would. Every step outside felt like walking into a storm of judgment. People I barely knew seemed to think my personal life was an open book. They could read and criticize. I learned to keep my head down to avoid the stares and the whispers. But inside, I was crumbling. My mother lived in another city, and when I told her what happened, she sighed heavily and said she wished I had been more careful. I could hear the disappointment in her voice. I wanted her comfort, but instead I felt even more alone. My father had passed away years ago, so there was no one else to lean on. Daniel never called, not once. It was as if he had erased me from his life entirely. The girl I saw him with appeared on his social media, smiling in photos with him at restaurants and parties. I stopped looking after a while because every picture felt like a knife in my chest. The stress began to affect my health. My doctor warned me that I needed rest and proper nutrition for the baby, but I was working long hours just to keep up with the bills. Some nights I went to bed hungry, so there would be enough food the next day. Still, I tried to hide my pain from everyone. I forced a smile at work and avoided conversations that could lead to my personal life. But when I came home and closed the door behind me, the mask would crumble. I would cry until my eyes swelled and my throat ached. Somewhere deep inside, though a small voice began to whisper. It told me that one day the tables would turn. One day Daniel would regret everything he had done to me. I did not know how yet, but that thought became a tiny light in my darkness. Winter crept into the city with its biting wind and grey skies. The cold seemed to sink into my bones, making every movement harder. By then, my belly had grown so much that walking up the stairs to my apartment left me breathless. The landlord did not care. He reminded me that the rent was due and that late payments would not be tolerated. One evening, after a long day at work, I returned home to find a pink slip taped to my door. It was a warning for unpaid utilities. My hand shook as I tore it down. The truth was, I had been choosing between paying bills and buying groceries. There was no room for both. The weight of loneliness pressed harder each day. The baby kicked more frequently now, and every movement was a reminder that I was the only one here to protect this tiny life. I talked to my unborn child late at night, telling them about the world and how I would make it better for us. Those conversations were the only thing keeping me sane. One afternoon, on my way back from the clinic, I saw Daniel again. He was standing outside a store, holding the hand of that same girl. They looked happy. I froze in place, my heart pounding so loud I could barely hear the traffic around me. He saw me. Our eyes met for just a moment, but he quickly looked away as if I were a stranger. The girl whispered something to him, and they both laughed before walking inside. I stood there for a long time, unable to move. The wind bit at my cheeks, but it was nothing compared to the ache in my chest. In that moment, something inside me began to shift. The hurt was still there, but it was changing into something heavier and sharper. At night, I stared at the ceiling, unable to sleep. I thought about every insult, every moment of abandonment, every smile he gave to someone else while I was struggling to breathe. The pain did not fade, but it started to harden into resolve. I realized that I could not keep living like this, drowning in misery. If he had turned his back on me, then I would build a life so bright it would blind him if he ever dared to look again. It would not be easy. I had nothing but a few worn clothes and the determination growing inside me. But I swore to myself and to my baby that we would rise no matter how many nights I had to cry alone. The day my labor started, the sky was dark and heavy with clouds. I had been feeling cramps for hours, but told myself it was just another rough day. By evening, the pain became unbearable. I called a taxi and clutched my stomach. The entire ride to the hospital, praying silently for strength. The labor was long and exhausting. The fluorescent lights above me blurred as waves of pain crashed through my body. There was no one holding my hand, no familiar face to tell me I would be all right. The nurses did their jobs quickly and efficiently, but their voices were distant, almost mechanical. When the cries of my baby finally filled the room, I felt both relief and fear. The nurse placed a tiny warm body on my chest, and tears spilled down my face. I whispered a promise to protect them from everything, even the kind of pain I had endured. I named my son Liam. The hospital bills were higher than I expected. I left the hospital with a newborn in my arms and debt hanging over my head. My apartment felt smaller now, every corner filled with the sound of Liam's soft breathing and occasional cries. The sleepless nights began almost immediately. Some nights I walked back and forth in the dim light, holding him close until my legs ached. Returning to work was not an option yet, so I sold whatever I could. Old clothes, cheap jewelry, kitchen appliances I rarely used. Every coin counted. I learned to survive on little food, just to make sure Liam had formula and diapers. Sometimes I saw Daniel's face in my mind and wondered if he even knew his son had been born, if he cared at all. The thought made my chest tighten with anger. He had taken the easy path, walking away while I carried the weight of 2 lives. One night as I rocked Liam to sleep, I caught my reflection in the window. My face looked older, and my eyes carried the shadows of sleepless nights. But behind the exhaustion, I saw something new, a glimmer of steel. That night I decided that this life would not break me. I would find a way to give Liam everything he deserved. And one day, Daniel would see exactly what he had thrown away. The first job I managed to get after Liam was born was cleaning offices at night. It paid little, but it was the only works I could find that allowed me to keep him with a neighbor during a few hours. The neighbor was kind enough to watch him for almost nothing because she knew how desperate I was. Those nights were long and lonely. I scrubbed floors, emptied trash bins and dusted desks under the hum of fluorescent lights. My back ached constantly, but I kept going because every small paycheck was a step forward. I told myself that this was temporary, that I would find a better way. During one of my cleaning shifts, I found a flyer left on a desk about a free skills training program for single mothers. They were offering lessons in bookkeeping and computer work. I stuffed the paper into my bag, thinking it was probably too good to be true. But later that night, as Liam slept beside me, I read it again and felt a spark of hope. The next week I enrolled. The classes were held twice a week in a small community center with peeling paint and squeaky chairs. Most of the women there had stories, similar to mine, stories of men who had walked away in lives, rebuilt from ashes. For the first time in a long while, I felt understood. The lessons were hard at first. My mind was rusty from months of exhaustion, and my body still carried the weight of sleepless nights. But I pushed through. I studied after Liam fell asleep, sometimes until dawn. The more I learned, the more I saw a door opening to a different kind of future. Months passed. I finished the program and was offered a job as an assistant at a small accounting firm. It was not glamorous, but it was steady, and it paid enough to cover rent, food, and even a small savings account. I started dressing better, doing my hair again, and holding my head higher when I walked outside. Still, Daniel never came. Not a call, not a message. That silence no longer made me cry. Instead, it fueled the quiet determination building inside me. I did not just want to survive anymore. I wanted to rise so high that he would regret every single step he had taken away from me. The months at the accounting firm turned into years, and with each passing day my skills sharpened. I learned not just the work in front of me, but also how the business ran from the inside out. I took extra projects, stayed late when needed, and made myself indispensable. My boss noticed. He began trusting me with bigger clients and more responsibilities. With the better pay came better stability. Liam started school, and I was able to move us into a slightly larger apartment. It was still modest, but it was warm, safe, and ours. I decorated his room with bright colors and shelves full of books. Watching him grow healthy and happy became my greatest reward. My appearance began to change as well. The tired shadow of the woman who once cried herself to sleep was fading. I started wearing tailored clothes, simple, makeup, and shoes that clicked confidently against the office floor. People began to treat me differently. They listened when I spoke. They respected me. One afternoon, during a business networking event, I found myself in a room filled with entrepreneurs and executives. I moved through the crowd, introducing myself and exchanging cards. It was a world I had never imagined being part of back when I was scrubbing floors for minimum wage. It was there that I met Victor, a successful business owner with a reputation for spotting potential in people others overlooked. We spoke at length about my work and my ambitions. He offered to mentor me in business management, something that felt both terrifying and thrilling. Under his guidance, I learned about investments contracts and how to negotiate deals that could change the course of a company. My income grew faster than I had ever dreamed possible. I began to save enough, not just for security, but for opportunity. Through it all, Daniel remained nothing more than a ghost in my memory. I had not seen him in years, but the thought of him still lingered like a shadow at the edge of my mind. I knew that one day our paths might cross again. When that day came, I would no longer be the broken girl he abandoned. I would be someone unrecognizable to him. By the time Liam turned 7, I was managing my own small consulting business. What started as a side project from home had grown into a fully staffed office with clients across the city. My name began to circulate in business circles, and I was invited to speak at events where people took notes on my words as if they were gold. Life was comfortable now. I could afford things I once thought were luxuries. Liam attended a good school, and I was able to take him on trips to places I had only dreamed of before. The weight of survival had lifted, and in its place was the thrill of achievement. One morning, I was reviewing a contract in my office when my assistant walked in to tell me about a potential new client. She handed me the folder, and I froze when I saw the name of the company. It was a small retail business owned by Daniel and his new partner, the same woman I had seen him with years ago. I sat back in my chair, letting the irony sink in. For years I had imagined what it would be like to see him again, and now fate was bringing him to my doorstep. I could have refused the meeting, but something inside me told me not to. This was the moment I had been unconsciously preparing for. The day of the meeting arrived. I wore a deep navy suit that fit perfectly and gave me the look of power I had earned. My hair was neatly pinned, and my heels clicked confidently against the floor as I walked into the conference room. When Daniel walked in, he looked older, more tired. The confidence he once carried seemed dulled. For a brief second, our eyes met, and I saw the recognition hit him. His mouth parted slightly, as if he wanted to say something, but I kept my face calm and professional. I greeted him with the same courtesy I would offer any client. We sat down and began discussing the terms of his proposal. I could see from the numbers that his business was struggling. He needed help badly. Every word he spoke only confirmed what I suspected. The life he had chosen after leaving me had not turned out the way he expected. I listened carefully, never once revealing the storm of emotions inside me. This was no longer about pain. It was about control. And for the first time in years, I held all of it. I spent the next few days reviewing Daniel's proposal in detail. His numbers were worse than I first thought. Debt piled high, interest rates swallowing his profits, and suppliers beginning to cut ties. He was desperate, and desperation makes people vulnerable. When he returned for our second meeting, greeted him with a polite smile and slid my revised contract across the table. The terms were strict, far stricter than I would have offered any other client. He would have to give up significant control of his business in exchange for my investment and services. I watched his face as he read. The flicker of hope he had when he walked in began to dim. He hesitated, clearly torn between pride and survival. I leaned back in my chair, calm and unshaken. I told him that this was the only way his business could be saved. The woman he had once chosen over me sat beside him. Her eyes darted over the contract, and I could see the fear creeping in. She whispered to him urgently, but he kept shaking his head, as if trying to find another option. There was none. Eventually, Daniel signed. His signature was shaky, his shoulders slumped. In that moment, I knew the balance between us had shifted forever. Years ago, he had walked away, leaving me broken and powerless. Now, he had placed his livelihood in my hands. From that day forward, I oversaw every decision in his company. I cut unnecessary expenses, negotiated with suppliers, and implemented changes that increased profits, but all in ways that kept him under my control. Every improvement was a reminder that the success he enjoyed now came not from his choices, but from the woman he had abandoned. He avoided small talk during our meetings, but I could see the regret in his eyes. Sometimes I caught him glancing at me, as if searching for the girl he had once known. She was gone, replaced by a woman who no longer needed him for anything. I was not finished. This was only the beginning. Months passed, and under my management, Daniel's company began to recover. The profits returned, the debts were reduced, and new clients started to appear. But with each success, the truth became clearer. He was no longer the owner in any real sense. He signed the papers, attended the meetings, but every major decision came from me. His pride was gone, replaced by quiet resignation. One rainy afternoon, after a particularly profitable quarter, I called a meeting. Daniel arrived looking cautious, his partner trailing behind him. I handed them a new set of documents. As they scanned the pages, their eyes widened. The papers stated that I was buying the remainder of his shares, effectively removing him from the company entirely. The price was fair, more than fair, but it was final. If he refused, the clauses in our contract would allow me to dissolve the partnership within weeks, leaving him with nothing. He looked at me then, really looked at me, for the first time since that night in the cafe, years ago. There was no anger in his eyes now, only the weight of regret. His voice was low when he asked why I was doing this. I told him calmly that business is about making choices, and that every choice comes with consequences. I reminded him, without raising my voice, that he had made his choice a long time ago when he walked away. The room was silent, except for the rain tapping against the windows. Eventually he signed the papers. His partner avoided my gaze, her face pale. I gathered the documents, thanked them for their time, and left without looking back. That night, I stood in my apartment watching Liam do his homework at the table. He was healthy, smart, and happy. I realized that I no longer felt the weight of the past pressing on me. The pain Daniel had caused was gone, replaced by a deep satisfaction. I had built a life for myself and my son from nothing. I had taken control of the very thing Daniel valued most, and done it without shouting, without begging, without breaking. My revenge was not in destroying him. It was in showing him the woman I had become, a woman who no longer needed him and never would again. As the city lights flickered outside, I closed the chapter of my life that began the night he walked away. The past could rest now, because I had won.